Chapter 4: The Ace of Aces and the Dude of Dudes. My brother Patrick is what shrinks call a self-installed role model. I went to his high school. I followed him into the Air Force. I learned to dance from him. He's the one who taught me, George, if you're going to steal, never get caught. His idea of honesty. We took care of each other and fought my mother and were partners in that struggle. When I started first grade at Corpus Christi, Patrick was in 7th grade. One day he showed up in my classroom. Not because my mother had gotten sick or our house had burned down. No, he'd been acting up in class, so Sister Marion had sent him down to 1st grade where he could be with children, closer to his own emotional level. He perched on one of those tiny 1st grade chairs and settled in. I came over and offered him a hunk of clay. We made little balls out of them and pegged him at the other 1st graders. Yeah, he's always been my best pal. My mother's primary motive in leaving my father was to protect me from the beatings he gave little Pat. It was the central fact determining the shape of our lives. And it certainly shaped Pat. My father, beaten by his father, was one of the many Americans who thought, and still do, that inflicting physical pain will persuade a child to act a certain way, beginning when they're, say, 2. My father's chosen weapon of discipline was a slipper, leather, bedroom, hard heel, equipped with one. He was a stocky, powerful guy and felt no need to hold back, especially with a couple of drinks under his belt and an opponent who weighed almost 30 pounds. From the time Pat took his torture in the most honorable way, he didn't break, he didn't fold, he didn't give Dad what he wanted. Patrick Sr.'s first question as he came through the door was always, "And how was my little man today?" To the credit of his spirit, Pat invariably told the truth about how the little man had been that day, and walked right into the teeth of the beatings. My mother, appalled by the violence, would always try to get him to lie to spare himself the slipper. But that wasn't Pat's way. My mother subscribed to the same parental tradition, but she knew how to delegate. When he was only 7, she sent Pat away to Mount St. Michael boarding school so that the Marist brothers could provide male discipline, a euphemism which translated as a hope that the brothers would beat the rotten temper out of him. Wonderful logic. 5 years of beating by his father had produced a little monster, so more violence, this time at the hands of strangers, ought to straighten him out. Ah, the Irish. Not surprisingly, my brother saw my mother as a big zero who'd failed to protect him from his father and had now given up on him. Mary made no bones about it. You've got your father's dirty, rotten temper, and you'll always seek out the scruff. You'll never amount to anything. And so my big brother set out to do exactly that. In her eyes, at least, not to amount to anything. Pat had his own way of dealing with all this antagonism, of embracing it, of enjoying it almost, so that the bastards never had the satisfaction of grinding him down. He would say he had no heart-on for those dedicated men of the cloth, the priests and brothers of Mount St. Michael's. Every time one of them whacked him, it was for good cause. He'd looked the guy full in the face and made some subversive comment. Patrick spent 4 years with the men of the cloth, so I'd only see him on Easter and Christmas vacation, but we were good pals. The age discrepancy actually worked to my benefit, especially in the all-important area of words. One time, right after he came back from boarding school, I would have been about 4 at the time, we were doing something together, and I said, "That dirty cow-sucker." I had heard it somewhere and made sense in my little mind that you'd suck a cow. Being a grizzled veteran of 9, my brother knew better. Not cow-sucker, George. Cocksucker. In a good Irish neighborhood, we were into bad shit. If there was a rule, Patrick's religion required him to break it. Anything I did wrong, he would encourage. We both resisted our mother because she had these delusions of grandeur. She was determined to make a couple of geniuses out of us, or fruits. The way Patrick puts it is concise. Mary wanted 2 little Lord Fauntleroys. What she got was a pair of hardened dog turds. Nothing made him prouder than the fact I was always getting kicked out of schools. though Corpus Christi had to take me back in 8th grade because they wanted me to write the school play. I was going down the road he'd already blazed. My mother wanted Patrick to go to a school called Regis on the east side, which was for bright kids. But of course he balked. He wanted to go to Cardinal Hayes in the Bronx, the cool school. He was more interested in football and dances than a goddamn book report. Even at Cardinal Hayes, he was the same old Patrick. He most admired Brother Philip, the littlest guy in the school and the best hitter. He used to hit Pat right in the nose with a full fist. Just fucking beautiful, my brother used to say. We didn't get to do as much together as I would have liked because of the age difference. Still, I knew his buddies and he knew mine. It was a tight neighborhood. Sometimes he'd be going to some party uptown and his friends would say, "Bring Georgie and tell him to bring his tape recorder." My mother had given me a tape recorder for my 8th grade graduation, and on it I'd record all these imitations of people in the neighborhood. I did one Pat loved of Dottie Murphy kicking her grandson. "Take that, you little bastard. Just because your father's a bastard don't mean you can be a bastard too." My mother saw me following in Pat's footsteps, and it drove her up the wall. She did try to head me off. She got me a job in a swank New York men's clothing store called Rogers Pete that had been around practically since the Declaration of Independence, a place where rich business pricks felt secure enough while trying on fancy suits to leave their wallets in their pants pockets, just begging to be stolen. I answered their call and raked in the stuff, but eventually got caught. The cardinal sin, according to Patrick. Perhaps the only thing he and Mary agreed on. Patrick has always shown the way, and I've followed in his footsteps. I went into the Air Force just like him. Between the two of us, we amassed 5 court-martials. He had 3, I had 2. My mother really loved that. Over the years, our relationship has shifted. Back in the 60s, Patrick was still slogging away with Catholicism, getting his kids baptized, and so on. He was a conservative Southern California car salesman in those days. Then he saw how much my Catholic rap on Class Clown and my attitudes toward big business upset our mother, and concluded I must be right. I encouraged him to write. Long ago, when I heard him shooting the shit with the guys at the car dealership, I knew he'd be great at it, and he was. I hooked him up with a terrific shrink, Dr. Charles Ansell, and he found out he wasn't fucked up. He was well. The world around him was fucked up. Patrick likes to say that the relationship has almost inverted, and I'm the main dude now. But it's subtler than that. He's influenced me perhaps without even quite knowing it, enticed out of me very final and violent and harsh judgments. I articulate them better than he does, and I'm obsessive-compulsive about getting them out where they can be heard. But for a long time now, he struck a deep chord in me. He writes wonderful dialogue, great earthy stuff. Talk about the sledgehammer. This is a steam-driven pile driver. I share his feelings, his ideas and passions, but he kicks them up into a higher gear. Once upon a time, I would never have done stuff like, "I love it when a lot of people die," or "people who ought to be killed." I didn't have a place in my garden for that stuff. His presence is a sort of reinforcement. It's less an inversion than that the wheel has come full circle, almost like the old days. If my big brother feels like that, it must be okay. Not that different from when I graduated 8th grade and Mary wanted me to go to Regis, just like she'd wanted Pat to do. And I said, forget it, just like Pat. At the end of 8th grade, you get this little 8th grade book, which everybody signs with things like, "Happy graduation, George, from the girl who sat next to you." The stuff of fond memories decades later. Patrick happened to be home on leave from the Air Force, and I asked him to sign my graduation book. This is what he wrote: "Go to Cardinal Hayes and be a cool guy." He signed it. The ace of aces and the dude of dudes, Your brother Patrick.